Okay, guys, so you might want to grab a pen and paper. Again, what we're going to do is we're going to look at whether or not gold is money, and number two, whether or not gold actually protects the value of your money against inflation. We're going to be looking at from 1913 all the way to 2019, and we're going to look at it in 30-year increments. I picked 30 years because the average person will work 30 plus years to save for retirement if they work a job. Okay, and so let's jump over to a site called Kitco.com. And as you guys can see right here, 1 ounce of gold here today on April the 5th, 2019 is $1,291 per ounce. You can see that here on the right side of the screen. What I want to do is I want to go up here to the top to charts and data, and we're going to pull up the history of gold prices. Simply scroll down, come over to the right side of the page, and click on historical gold charts. So again, as you can see today here on April the 5th, 2019, currently based on stock market price. Now this is the price you can buy gold for, but the stock market price is $1,291.41 per ounce. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down here and we're going to look at gold based on the year 1833 through 1999. Simply scroll down here and click on View Charts and Data. Okay, so before we jump into numbers, I want you to look at this chart. This is an incredible chart. It's the history of gold all the way from 1833 to 1998. And what you're watching, guys, is how gold tracks inflation of the U.S. paper dollar. And as you notice, from 1833 all the way to 1968, there really wasn't much inflation. Why? Because our dollar was actually on a gold standard. And that means that the gold that was in the vault represented the paper dollars that were in circulation. If there was no gold in the vault, there would be no paper dollars. And so I just wanted to really drive this home for you to really grasp the understanding, guys, that gold is money and gold does track inflation. In fact, it protects the purchasing power of your money from inflation. Okay, so let's scroll down here. We're going to start 1913. 1 ounce of gold was $20.64. We're going to go ahead and round the numbers up to even numbers. So we're going to call it $21 an ounce. 30 years later would be 1943, which is right next to it. And you can see that gold increased to $33.85. So what I want to do is I want to bring up an inflation calculator to look at the inflation on the American dollar from 1913 to 1943 to determine whether or not if gold increased based on inflation, or I should say the protection of inflation. And so guys, this is what's called, and you can find this online, a CPI calculator. What we're going to do is we're going to take that $21 of an ounce of gold in 1913, and we're going to put 1913 right here. And we're going to look at 1913 again to 1943. So here's what I want to know. What was the inflation rate over that period of time? Okay, so we can see right here from 1913 to 1943, it says U.S. inflation rate, $21 in 1913 to 1943. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index, prices in 1943 are 74.75%, we'll round that up to 75%, higher than the average prices throughout 1913. And so what we want to do is we want to know if gold kept up with 75% of inflation over that 30-year period from 1913 to 1943. And the way that we're going to figure that out, guys, is we're going to bring up our Google calculator. And so what we know is that 1 ounce of gold in 1913 was $21. And we're just simply going to say $21 plus 75% of inflation equals, that means 1 ounce of gold would have had to increase to $36.75 per ounce over that 30-year period in order to protect the purchasing power of your money from inflation. Let's go back and look at what gold increased to in 1943. And as you can see, guys, gold increased to $33.85. And, guys, $36.75 was the 75% inflation. I hope you guys are following me. So gold protected the value of your dollar against inflation. Yet, if you had saved your money in paper dollars, here's what it says. In other words, $21 in 1913 is equivalent in purchasing power to $36.70 in 1943. Simply speaking, you would have needed 75% more money to buy the same items or live the same lifestyle that you lived in 1913. That means that your retirement account would have to increase a minimum of 75%. But here's what we know by the data that we're looking at, that the dollar decreased by 75%. Wow. Okay, let's jump to the next 30 years, and that would be 1943 to 1973. So again, we know that gold in 1943 had increased to $33.85. Now, 30 years later, in 1973, gold increased to $97.32. Now let's go and look at what type of inflation we had in this country on our paper dollars from 1943 to 1973. So we're simply going to take the $34 per ounce in 1943, and again, guys, we're going to go from 1943 to 1973. Okay, guys, this one is really going to be a tough one, right? It says U.S. inflation rate, $34 in 1943 to 1973, 30 years, right? According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index, prices in 1973 are 156.65%. We'll go ahead and round that up to 157% higher than the average prices throughout 1943. The dollar experienced an average inflation rate of 3.19% during that period. So let's go see if gold actually kept up with the inflation of 157%. Okay, so we know in 1943 the gold had increased to $34. So we're going to go ahead and put $34 plus 156%. And that means, guys, that gold would have to increase to $87.04 per ounce over that 30-year period. Well, let's go back to Kitco and take a look. And as we can see, guys, in 1973, gold increased to $97.32. Do you guys see that? Gold would have only had to increase to $87 to keep up with 156% of inflation on our paper dollar savings account. Yet gold increased, guys, all the way to $97.32. And so in those two illustrations, we saw that gold protected the value of your paper dollar, although your paper dollar actually lost its purchasing power. It says, in other words, $34 in 1943 is equivalent to the purchasing power of $87.26 in 1973, a difference of $53.26 over 30 years. That means that for every $34 you saved under your mattress, you would have had to figure out some way for that to increase an additional $53.26. Wow. Okay, let's take a look at 1973 to 2003. So again, we know in 1973, 1 ounce of gold was $97.32. Now I'm going to have to bring up a different view to show 2003 because this chart only goes to 1999. So we're simply going to go back to the first page Okay, so I'm going to come down here to 2003, and we're going to click on right here, guys. This is December of 2003, and we're going to go ahead and view chart. Okay, so we can see that gold ended in 2003 at $415 per ounce. Now, what we want to know, again, did gold protect us against inflation? So let's bring up our inflation calculator. Oh, wow, guys, it even got worse for the dollar. It says U.S. inflation rate, $97 in 1973 to 2003. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index, prices in 2003 are 314.41% higher than they were in 1973. The dollar experienced an average inflation rate of 4.85% per year during this time. Okay, so now let's jump over and see. Now we know that the inflation over that 30-year period of time, 1973 to 2003, was 315%. So let's go back and see if gold kept up with inflation. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that $94 plus 315% inflation, and that means that gold would have had to increase to $390 to keep up with inflation. Well, what we know from Kitco is that gold increased to $415, once again proving that gold is money and it protects the purchasing power of your paper dollars when you simply convert your paper into physical gold. And so, guys, what that means is that your paper dollar lost 315%. In fact, let me jump back over to the inflation calculator. And we'll go ahead and read what it says. It says, in other words, 97 US dollars in 1973 is the equivalent in purchasing power of $401.98 in 2003. A difference of $304.98 over a 30-year period. Ladies and gentlemen, let me try to break this down. That means that if you had taken 97 US dollars and put it in your piggy bank in 1973, 30 years later, in 2003, you would need to live the same lifestyle, to buy the same goods and services. You would need an additional $304.98 to be able to live the same lifestyle that the $97 provided you in 1973. This is why they don't teach about money in school.